This is the Baunfire Gaming Podcast, episode 347. I'm your host, Morgan, aka Bon Diesel, and this week we'll be talking about Battlefield 6's release date possibly leaked, Star Wars Outlaws sequel canceled, Splitgate 2 returning to beta status, and much more. I am not very likable on social media, and I think that probably needs to change. This is something I've known over the years, doing content creation, just being a person on social media, being a person in the world right now. I think it's pretty easy to get frustrated, annoyed, so on and so forth. But when it comes to content creation, stuff like that, there's whole additional things. I recently talked in another podcast about being a small content creator and doing it for fun and maybe not seeing huge amounts of success and growth and stuff like that, especially years later, many years after, the game, when I was focused on the Division, it's a smaller audience, but it's a more involved audience, right? So growth was easier then. Then you move to Mass Effect, a franchise with a very established set of content creators who, maybe it's not the most open garden in the world. It feels more like competition than cooperation, right? And I think all the years of that, for me at least, has gotten frustrating and annoying at times, and that can lead to maybe not always having the best attitude, maybe seeming burned out or just straight up feeling burned out. And I think I've definitely been kind of, quote unquote, suffering from that. I find that, most of the things I actually tweet about and stuff are being annoyed by game reviewers and influencers for various reasons, or defending, not even defending, just being annoyed with the portrayal of certain platforms and things like that. And I still think that those are okay things to do. I think it's okay to call out other content creators or influencers who are just honestly just straight up being dishonest or clickbaity or whatever. I think it's okay to point out some lame patterns that we see when certain platforms are talked about and stuff. What I don't like is how that shouldn't feel like the main focus. I shouldn't look at my timeline and see that like 3 out of 4 posts I make are negative or whatever. And I think more than anything, I still want to grow on social media, to grow this podcast, to grow my YouTube channel, even my Twitch, even though I barely do it anymore. And that's when I get to a point where I stop and think like, hey, if I was a random person, if I was a Mass Effect fan or a Division fan or just a gamer in general, what are the chances someone's going to see something I post that is going to be like, hey, that seems like a person I want to interact with, instead of, maybe right now where it may be something that maybe someone wouldn't want to interact with. Maybe I don't always come off like someone that you would want to spend time listening to. And I think I'm trying to deal with that. So I think I'm just going to do my best to at least mix it up, right? I've been trying to make a point that on every social media platform I'm on, Twitter, Blue Sky, and Threads, every day, quote tweet someone else, either a review someone did or a video they posted or just something funny or interesting they said that I care about, on every platform. And it's likely going to be through different things, just to, if anything, just make some more connections, to reach out to other people. One of my biggest weaknesses with making content ever since the beginning was cooperating with other people. I've mostly avoided it because of scheduling, because that can be such a nightmare. There's also a part of I like to be the one talking, right? If you've checked out any of my interviews or the podcasts I've done with other people, unfortunately, I have a really bad habit of talking way too much. I want to say in my most recent one, I did a better job of, shutting up more often. But even then, it's not my best trait. So I think my big thing is to try to celebrate other people more, or at least incorporate other people's thoughts more often, to, make the majority of the things I post, things I'm excited about, or things I'm looking forward to, or have insight on, not necessarily criticism. I still am going to call out people when I think they're being crappy. I'm still going to have my snarky post here and there, but I want to get better about that not being the main thing I'm putting out there. It's bad energy. People don't want to interact with that. It's very likely I've burned bridges even with people I don't even know, because of it. And maybe there's some things I can repair as well, if I want to. There's honestly some relationships I don't want to repair. This was all really spurned by me making a comment on a recent Division 2 video, by the main Ubisoft channel, because they brought someone to their studio who I had a extremely negative interaction with, someone who essentially harassed me for a long period of time, pretty mercilessly, and is part of the reason I stopped making Division content, actually. And I pointed that out, and someone who used to follow me pretty closely, pointed out that I'm being petty, bitter, or whatever. And while I think that my beef with that person is legitimate, I could also see that I think it's okay for me to point that out, but I don't think that should be the main thing people have seen from me for the last month or whatever. That can be a thing I've said, and I can make those feelings clear and known, but it should be a part of what people know about me, and not, man, I've seen him say talk about that same situation like 4 times, and he maybe needs to get over it. And maybe that's true. I don't know. But I think it's more about doing more positive stuff, because I think all the negativity and the bitterness and the pettiness and all of that, it's a part of my personality. I'm not going to pretend like it's not. But if someone's watched me on stream, or even watched my videos, or listened to the podcast, they'll know that that's not the bulk of my personality. It's definitely a feature, but I think that if someone actually watched a stream or interacted with me directly, they would come to realize that that isn't me, even if it's what I portray the most on social media and things like that. So the selfish part of it is wanting to improve my chances of growth on all my platforms. The less selfish side of it is just to try to have a better experience online and in the content creation game and on social media, because I really do believe in the whole idea of you get what you put out, right? You reap what you sow. And I think it's okay to sow a little bit of the snarkiness and stuff, but I think I should sow a lot more positivity and happiness and stuff like that, because I don't want to be reaping pettiness and snarkiness constantly. I would like a little bit of that positivity back. So that's the idea, that's the goal, and that's how we're going to open this episode. Okay, let's jump into the gaming news for this week. We have Battlefield 6's story trailer. It has been revealed. It's short. It's like 45 seconds or a minute or something. It's awesome. It's really, really cool. Some insanely high quality rendering and models, and the cinematics are great. All in engine. Obviously nowadays, in engine barely means anything, because many game engines these days, if you do pre-rendered stuff, can basically be like photorealistic, cinematic movie quality stuff. But it still does look really good. And I still think that some of what we saw probably was using actual game models and locations and things like that. So the story is a little convoluted. It seems like it looks like it's gonna take place at least somewhat in the United States, which is interesting. I always thought that, was it Modern Warfare 2 or 3, where the United States got invaded? I'll always think that's an interesting setting, the whole Wolverines setting. So I'm curious to how they treat that. The antagonist is interesting. So I would assume we'll be playing as American or Western forces. The antagonist, they call him a mercenary group, but they seem pretty well equipped. So they appear to be a full, like, legit military force. Somewhat what Battlefield 2042 has, even though the story on that is pretty sparse. But it does seem like it's going to be a situation where we won't be fighting Russia or China, or at least not them directly. Maybe they'll be associated with one of these groups, or not. We don't really know. In one of the previews, it kind of gave us the impression that, like, France may be part of this militia or this mercenary group, and potentially other NATO countries, which would definitely be strange, would be kind of interesting. Definitely a big change from the previous games, where we've had kind of the typical action movie, antagonist of China or Russia, or in 2042, it's the US versus Russia, but you're fighting as mercenaries that they're hiring as like a neutral party. It kind of stinks, if you want me to be totally honest. I'm hoping that they get away from that, and it seems like they are with the next one. We did find out at the end of the trailer that the multiplayer reveal will be on the 31st of July. That will correspond with a big event they're doing. There's scores of content creators, both Battlefield related and just kind of general gaming influencers, appear to be going to that show. I'm extremely jealous and also very understanding why I would not even be close to their radar, even though, funny enough, if there's a game I've played enough in the last 3-4 years where I would, in theory, qualify for something like this, it would probably be Battlefield. I've played a ton of 2042, and probably more than any other game in the last few years. Maybe Baldur's Gate 3 I've played more, probably Mass Effect, but the list is short. So I'm excited for that event. I'm excited that we have a single player campaign for Battlefield again, but the real hours are going to be in the multiplayer. So I'm excited to see how all that plays out, and what they've shown us so far with the labs testing of, leaked things, quote unquote leaked. They all seem very conveniently leaked, but we'll see if we ever find out more about that. But the blogs and stuff they've posted, I think they have taken in what people didn't like about 2042, and honestly what they didn't like about 1 and 5 and even Battlefield 3 and 4, all the way back to Battlefield 2142. And it seems like they are doing things to make the formula modern, and they aren't being as restrictive with, like, gun types depending on your class and things like that, but they are doing things to try to give that old school feel, and to try to, satisfy the old school players while also bringing the game to a modern time. And I think that's okay. The one kind of interesting thing that also happened was they probably, maybe in the terms or in one of the, on their website, I think it is, it supposedly references a release date of October 10th. That seems pretty fair. It's very likely here in the next couple of weeks they'll be doing some kind of open beta testing. October seems kind of far away. I honestly would have anticipated something more like, like late August or even September. But maybe they're going to do multiple rounds of testing, and they really are serious about getting people's takes on this before they put it out. And then the other rumor that's come out since this reveal is that a battle royale mode will drop sometime after the multiplayer and single player comes out. So the rumor is that the single player and the main multiplayer is going to be part of the paid purchase, and then the battle royale will be a free to play option later. I'm a little mixed on that. I don't want to see the multiplayer suffer and lose players and stuff like that to a free to play mode that isn't that, like, core Battlefield gameplay. But I think that people who like Battlefield and like its multiplayer will maybe try out a battle royale mode, but would still stick mostly to the more typical multiplayer gameplay of the series, where you would probably have more of, like, the Ghost Recon players and things like that, come over and maybe try out the battle royale. But regardless, I'm excited. A new Battlefield. It's going to be modern setting. I don't want any more World War II or World War I battlefields. I'm sorry. I just, World War II fully fleshed out would have been interesting, but they didn't do that. World War One, I know a lot of people love Battlefield 1, but man, I couldn't imagine a more boring game. Like, and I played a ton of it. Maybe you can find my hours. I don't know. I played solid amount out of it. I don't know. That aesthetic, that set of military equipment and stuff was just boring to me. It'd be curious for them to do like a Vietnam game again. I do remember Battlefield Vietnam being like one of my favorite ones. Just the lush environments and the weapons and the music and all that was extremely cool. So, what I truly want is, Battlefield 6 is like modern, maybe near future. I want them to do 2143 again, where the 2142 is a game I think a lot of people forget about or don't know. It has mechs. It's got, super advanced like laser weapons and stuff like that. But it did it with a really, and God, if you look at the screenshots now, it's old. It's extremely old. But at the time, it was really neat. And it still kept a realistic aesthetic, right? And the coolest thing they had was, I can't remember what it was called. I think they did something similar in one, maybe. They had like a dreadnought mode where each side would have this big like mothership where you could deploy from, and like the airborne units would come out of it, and you could even spawn on it and get into these like cannons that would shoot you to different parts of the map. You could like pick where it shot you, in like a deployment pod or whatever. In that mode, I still don't know if they've ever had a multiplayer mode that was that cool. Titan mode, maybe. I think that's what it might have been called. Now, what is interesting is in Battlefield 4, if people remember, late in that game, before Battlefield 1 came out, they had a bunch of nods to 2142, where like one of the maps they released, or maybe they updated a map that it was a hangar for one of those Titans, one of the big giant ships. And then there was like a prototype tank that they put out that had like a rail gun in it instead of a cannon. And then there were, I think, a few weapons that were the futuristic style weapons and all that. So Battlefield 6, I'm super excited for it. Also excited for what comes next, but that's probably 4 or 5 years away. So hoping that Battlefield 6 comes out. Hope it's a fun campaign. Loving the multiplayer, maybe even a battle royale. Hopefully that does well, and we get lots of updates and fun stuff for that. Speaking of that style of game, we found out that, not only is the next Ghost Recon game coming, which we kind of knew already, but it's going to be first person, which was kind of suggested by an executive from Ubisoft and then confirmed later by some journalists. I find that to be really interesting. I have been saying for a long time, I thought Breakpoint and Wildlands, right, were just too much of a departure from the actual Ghost Recon formula. I found Wildlands was okay, but it was kind of goofy, and the AI companion sucked, and it was the story was not very believable, and it was kind of silly. It was fine, but I thought it was too much of a departure. And then Breakpoint was a breaking point for me, and the story was abysmal. The quality of the game was terrible, and to this day, it's improved a lot. Or before they stopped, they stopped working on it not too long ago, and it did improve a lot. They put in a lot of things. They took out a lot of things that the community wanted in or taken out. But even fairly in the last year, I've played it, and I still think it's one of the worst feeling games I've ever played. The player movement just feels bad to me. The gunplay feels awful. The world is completely empty and has just no soul to it. The robot enemies suck. I think that they were such a cop out of having to make interesting and smart human enemies, and they just I don't know. I really despised it. Because they had the wolves, who were basically supposed to be, I would say, the equivalent of like the Division's hunters, but the hunters in the Division are like these like really tough enemies, and the wolves were just these guys with funny looking helmets, basically. I'm hoping that this is a return, and if it's a first person game, then in some capacity, I'm not getting the return to the roots of Ghost Recon. I was hoping for like Future Soldier 2. it sure sounds like they're going back to like OG Ghost Recon, which a lot of people don't remember. The really, really old original Rainbow Six games made by Red Storm, when I don't think Ubisoft even owned Red Storm yet and had any Tom Clancy titles. The original Rainbow Six games were these first person shooters where you had to plan out like multiple teams of SWAT teams of these little, groups, and you literally would set up these routes through the levels to take out the terrorists, rescue hostages, whatever. And you would have to like coordinate point by point, movement by movement, using these like waypoints, what all the teams would do. And you could even have like a sniper on Overwatch and things like that. And everything would be off voice commands. So like on your keyboard, you would have these, I can't remember if it was the F keys or what, but like you would start the map and all of the teams would go to their first position, which you would set. And then you would hit a button, and all at once a team would, blow up a door and enter, would come in through a window, or would drop through the roof all at the same time. And you could coordinate all these actions and set up these hotkeys to make them happen. And it was super cool. It was so much fun. Well, Ghost Recon was originally a offshoot of that, basically, and then it kind of became its own brand over the years. And Ghost Recon was more focused on military, where the Rainbow Six series was more focused on like domestic, SWAT teams and things like that. Obviously, things have gone a bit awry since those sweet days back then, but I'm curious to if this Ghost Recon is really going to be like a return to like the OG roots of Ghost Recon. I'm going to be totally honest. I'm terrified it's just basically going to be Far Cry. There was a rumor I saw today that maybe it's going to be an Unreal Engine. So it's not even going to use the Anvil engine, which Far Cry, Ghost Recon, a bunch of Ubisoft games have used, even though some have transitioned over to Snowdrop, which the Division uses. The next Ghost Recon being on Unreal would be interesting. It would be a big move for Ubisoft, because they are basically the only studio, or one of the few studios left, who really does depend on their own tech, on their own technology and their own engine and everything. So it would kind of make me sad if they stopped doing that. I kind of think it's cool that Ubisoft still runs off their own stuff. Kind of like I think it's cool that EA uses Frostbite for everything. I think that's neat for them to have their own, even though they also are transitioning, at least temporarily, to Unreal for a bunch of their games. So we'll have to wait and see. I want to be excited for a Ghost Recon game. I think the only way that will ever happen again is if Red Storm is the studio making it. And unfortunately, it looks like Red Storm is being turned into a co-dev studio at best, and maybe worse in the future. We'll have to wait and see. Speaking of Ubisoft, we have Ubisoft Massive, the makers of The Division and Star Wars Outlaws and Avatar. The story came out this week that Star Wars Outlaws had a sequel, an early development, so probably pre-production, if not even before that has been canceled. And that is a bummer, I think. I think it's a shame that game didn't get the kind of reception I think it deserved. I think it's a really fun game. I think it's got really good characters. I think it has a great story. The worlds, Ubisoft Massive will never be beaten when it comes to environments and to making places to play games. The Division, Avatar itself, Outlaws, even way back in the day, their ground control game. I'm pretty sure that was them. Or whatever RTS they had back in the day. Even that game had some cool aesthetic. Outlaws, I think, had a lot of potential, but my guess is that Avatar and Outlaws were both great games, but neither of them sold that well. And the problem with licensed games is that you aren't even getting the full profit. And so if the games don't sell that well, not only did they not sell well, so you didn't get much revenue, you got even less revenue, because a good chunk of that revenue is going to go to the license holder. So it very likely made both of those games. I hope they at least broke even, just for the health of the studio, but it likely wasn't good on the financial side. This very likely means that the focus moving forward, as we already knew, will be the Division 3. There was also an unannounced project that even I had heard my own rumblings that some people who I thought would be working on Division 3 won't be, and they were working on this unannounced project. There's some speculation that unannounced project was the Outlaws sequel. I don't think so. From the people I talked to, it's been, honestly, I think a couple years since I've talked to anyone about this and gotten any info. But at that time, I wasn't under the impression that this unannounced project was Outlaws, because Outlaws was still in development. So it wouldn't have made sense for those people to, you know, the timing didn't make sense. So I still suspect that Massive is working on the Division 3 and another game we don't know about yet. They are still working on the Division 2, and as recently as, you know, in the last 24 hours, they've had some insinuation that they have more Division 2 content coming out. We had the not the leaks, but we had the kind of tease, you know, not that long ago, of them adding snow to Washington, D.C., the main setting of the game. And yeah, we'll just have to see how that plays out. I personally wish they would have stopped making Division 2 content years ago, because I don't think it's been very high quality. And I think it's really, I think it's hurt the game more than it's helped it, at least from a narrative point of view. The narrative and the lore at this point is just completely buck wild, with people coming back to life and just a bunch of stuff that makes no sense. And where I once saw the Division as a pretty grounded franchise, story wise at least, it's jumped the shark completely, and it's basically a soap opera at this point to me. I'm still curious to what they do with it, but the days of me like enjoying this like pretty gritty, grounded story that they were telling in the first game, and when the second game first came out, has been, for lack of a better term, ruined by what they've done after the base game. So I'm glad they're still working on it. They must be making enough money for it to be sustainable for them to keep making content, which is awesome. But I just fear that they're making the Division 3's job harder and harder and harder to follow up to, as 2 gets more and more ridiculous. But I'll let the smart people at Ubisoft Massive figure all of that out. Forza Horizon 5, I believe, has sold more than 3 million copies on PlayStation 5, making it the highest selling game on PlayStation's platform in 2025. Pretty notable, considering they have had their own games, and yeah, I don't know that they've had any big first parties come out. I think Ghost of Yotai is the first big one, but they have had third party exclusives like Death Stranding come out. Obviously a much shorter timeline, but a much more high profile game as well. So it kind of seems like maybe Xbox putting their games on other platforms wasn't a bad idea, because I bet Forza Horizon 5 has not sold 3 million copies on Xbox this year. I'm still a pretty firm believer that Xbox doing the multi-platform thing is totally fine, but I think the way that they've done it with Forza Horizon, the way they're going to do it with Hellblade 2, is the right way. I don't like day and date on everything. I don't like that Doom was on PlayStation day one. I would be totally fine if it was on PlayStation 6 months later, a year later, whatever. I'm not a big fan of the day one. I understand that Xbox isn't focused on selling hardware as much these days. I understand that financially or on paper, you know, selling it day one is perfectly fine. I do believe that they are causing more trouble for themselves with their community and with people who, you know, support their products and stuff. And unfortunately, just in the, you know, the reporter sphere of gaming, the games media industry, by doing the day and date. I think that you should, you know, have some respect for your own hardware or whatever and your own consumers, just for a small window. I don't need it to be permanent. I don't need it to be, heck, the way that PlayStation even does it with PC, where they make you wait 3 to 5 years to play on PC, and then get mad when the game doesn't sell because it's not relevant anymore. 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever. I don't really care. You know, do a slight delay, but put it over there, because obviously it works. Forza Horizon 5 was way older than that when it went over, and it did great. You know, it's selling really well. And as a Xbox fan, when I'm looking at maybe getting their next console, when I'm looking at continuing to pay for Game Pass, I imagine the success on the other platform is making it, I know one day Game Pass will get more expensive. I certainly hope the success they're having with their third parties, though, with these other platforms, maybe makes that happen later. Maybe it makes the jump in price a little bit less. That's probably me being too hopeful, but I'm trying to have a good outlook on it. I think it's a good thing for this to be happening, and I won't be drug into the whole conversation of this somehow being a negative thing. At the end of the day, I'm happy more people get to play Forza Horizon. It's an awesome series. It's a great game. It's the best racing game on PlayStation now. I know people like their Gran Turismo and some of the other games over there. I personally believe that the base Forza is better than Gran Turismo. I've played both. It's been a while since I've had Gran Turismo, but I just think, even from what I've seen, what they're doing, Forza has just taken the better path. And then Forza Horizon being kind of the arcade racer, it's awesome. And it's gorgeous, completely beautiful. I'm sure it looks real good on PlayStation 5 Pro. Speaking of Xbox, they have reverted their holiday pricing decision and will not be selling games like The Outer Worlds 2 for $80, and instead they are reverting the price down to $70. This was funny to me because everyone was freaking out about the $80 because Nintendo recently did it with some of their games and Xbox was following suit. PlayStation hasn't done it yet. They will eventually. Don't doubt it at all. But what was funny about it is that people are like, oh, thank goodness they moved it back to 70. Well, I'm over here looking at it being like, no, back to 60. Like, it used to be 60. I remember, So, it seems like we've lost that battle, but it's fine. I was going to play Outer Worlds 2 either way. I was going to play it through Game Pass. I would have paid $80 for it if Game Pass didn't exist. So it's fine. Either way, it would have hurt sales. I think the PR side of it was the worst part. It was just another fairly whatever reason to just rip on Xbox from a lot of the talking heads. Now they've gone back on it. It's so funny. I've seen people being like, Xbox bullied into it's like look, they're making a good consumer move here. You're not going to see Nintendo's not going to do this. When PlayStation moves their games to 80 one day, they aren't going to go back. So, why not celebrate some good moves every now and then? That's probably just my Xbox fanboy coming out. And some kind of interesting news, we have Sony has purchased 2.5% of Bandai Namco in a strategic partnership move. This looks like, because I believe it was Sony who did it, not PlayStation. It's very likely a play towards Bandai Namco doing lots of things other than games. I'm sure it's partially games, but I believe they've gotten really into like the anime side of things and all that. So it's likely just two big corporations working together on something. I am not anticipating Sony acquiring Bandai Namco and trying to bring them under their umbrella. Because honestly, if I have to be straight up, all the studios they've had to shut down, and with the way that Bungie is going for them and Destiny, I'm willing to bet they don't have an appetite for acquisitions at all right now. But that's just my guess. Moon Studios founder says they may not release No Rest for the Wicked on Xbox Day 1 due to quote-unquote market factors. It's a reminder that the founder here is Thomas Mahler, who is reportedly a hyper-toxic boss who has made working at that studio not great and has caused a pretty big rift between them and Xbox. This is the studio who makes the Ori games, which are beloved by Xbox fans. I find them too hard, so I'm not a big fan, but I recognize the greatness. There's a lot of thoughts that that there's some tension between Xbox and the studio because of all the issues that have been reported there. This seems to be a play by him to kind of play on some of his own animosity for Xbox due to that situation and kind of pushing these clickbait topics about it. The last official numbers we got from, I think it was Xbox, I want to say it was back 2022 or 2023, was that they had sold like 25 million Series X's and Series S's. I'm not aware that we've gotten exact numbers since then. It's been 2.5, 3 years since we got that info. I see everyone cite all the time 30 million Xboxes sold. I find it really hard to believe it's that low. I guess just my gut tells me it would be closer to 35, 40, if not more. I've seen numbers as high as 50. That's probably a bit of hopium from Xbox fans. Let's say 35 to 40. You can't tell me. I refuse to buy into this narrative that 35 to 40 million customers isn't a viable market to target. I refuse to believe, even if it's half of PlayStation 5s. Like, yeah, selling to a platform with 70 to 80 million users, in theory, yeah, that's pretty lucrative. That's something I would definitely do. But a lot of these influencers and journalists and stuff talk about Xbox's platform like you're selling it to 100,000 people, where that's not true. You're talking about 30 to 40 million people that you're targeting. And even if you don't do a Game Pass deal or whatever, good games have sold great on Xbox. Even games that were on Game Pass have still sold well, if they're good, right? Even if they do Game Pass. So this to me just seems like sour grapes. There's also a lot of reports that the studio isn't doing very well, so they just may not have the resources to put out a game on 3 platforms. So maybe the play towards PlayStation and Nintendo is they straight up don't have the money to do it for Xbox as well. Then, that would make a little bit more sense. On to more Xbox news. They have discontinued their movie and TV service. If you didn't know, which I forgot, the Xbox store has a whole section where you can buy movies and even episodes and seasons of TV shows. This is one of those ones where this was like the perfect story for a lot of journalists and stuff like that. It's a situation where this sucks because people have done this, right? People own movies through the Xbox store. People own TV episodes and seasons through it. My guess is that the peak of that being used was probably like 10 years ago, because they wouldn't be discontinuing it if people were using it a lot right now, right? I'm not going to celebrate this. I'm not going to try to spin this as a good thing, but I kind of can spin it as like, it probably makes sense. I would be amazed if the consistent over the last 5 years, the number of people doing this consistently, it couldn't have been in more than the hundreds. If it was thousands, I'd be amazed. And, I assume with a service like that, you're having to keep up on licenses for the TV shows and the music and the movies and all that stuff. And I assume if they're doing this, it was probably costing them more than they were making. They're still making that stuff possible you can still consume anything that you own already, but they're going to cut off the ability to buy new. And I've seen some rumors or some thought that it looks like you can like claim these on other services and keep your ownership on active services. I don't know much about that. That was kind of something I saw in passing. So hopefully, obviously one day they're going to cut off access to this entirely. I hope that they offer, whether it be refunds or the ability to activate, these licenses on other platforms. I don't know. But this was one of those just perfect stories for people if they wanted to kind of rip on Xbox, was to be like, oh, I can't believe they're getting rid of this. And like, I saw people on like, I think it was like Threads, where I saw someone with no profile picture being like, Xbox is the only way I consume movies and TV shows. I'm like, you've got to be kidding. Like, they're not talking about like Netflix or whatever through Xbox. They're talking about the Xbox store movie and TV service. I just refuse. Like, there's got to be like one person on earth who is using that for everything. For that person, genuinely, this sucks. But I suspect it's a move that makes sense in the big picture. We found out that the Hades 2 final beta patch is being released and is the lead up to the game going full release version 1.0 later in 2025. I like Hades. I tried out the first game. I'm terrible at it. I tried out, I think it was the beta or the test or whatever for 2. It's the same situation. I suck at these games. I'm not good at these type of games. I have a ton of respect for them. Very beautiful art, really fun combat, really interesting kind of the whole dungeon crawler kind of roguelite thing. Not really my type of game, but this is probably going to be a pretty big deal. I'm curious if it gets any Game of the Year attention, because the first game definitely did. I don't think that the hype around 2 has really been all that big, even though I've only heard good things about it. Sometimes I feel like the early access to me for Hades 2 made no sense. I just didn't understand it. I don't know why you would do it. You know, I mean, I do, like, for testing. It's also marketing, but I think it kind of hurt it because it's like a known commodity. So it's not really all that interesting that it was in testing and all the updates they've done and stuff. I've seen no one talk about it. Where in the lead up to Hades 1, there was a whole, documentary being done on it and stuff like that. And then with this, it just kind of seems like maybe they tried to recreate the magic of the first one, and it wasn't really there. I suspect they have the knowledge and the experience at this point. They probably should have just kept making Hades 2 and then released it straight up. But what do I know? They definitely know more than I do. Speaking of a game studio who may not know more than I do, the Splitgate 2 developer has removed the game from its full release, put it back into a beta state, has done layoffs, and is looking to relaunch the game in 2026. This was the guy during the Summer Game Fest who wore the "Make FPS Great Again." At the end of the day, it was just a stupid play on a dumb political thing. I don't really care that much about it. It was just cringy. But the fact that the guy, especially his reaction to people afterwards about it, was really lame. And then we learned a whole bunch of stuff about him, where his dad is this hyper rich guy. So he's this Nepo baby. His dad is the main investor in the studio. And it kind of ruined this whole thing where Splitgate, the first game, was basically Halo, but with the portal mechanic. And people really loved it and thought it was cool. And it had a very organic feel, even though it was a Nepo baby project. It had good vibes, right? And then they got kind of a little too big for their britches when Halo Infinite came out and didn't have the best reaction at first, especially in multiplayer. So the Splitgate, they at first it was fine. They were kind of doing this thing like, hey, if you want a complete game, come play us. But then they started advertising Splitgate 2, and they were obviously kind of trying to step up to more of a AAA experience when it came to marketing and things, cinematics and all that, and trying to do, kind of the antithesis of what their whole thing was with their first game. And then it came out, and for all intents and purposes, I've seen tons of good reviews and takes on Splitgate 2 that it's a fun game. But they tried to do a battle royale or a or whatever. They made a big battle mode instead of just the deathmatch that the game is, and that's what people like about it. And then all the stuff with the guy, it just seems like this is a hot mess. And I'm sorry, I simply don't think that there's a future where them pulling this game off a full release, putting it back in a beta, laying off a quarter of their studio or something, and then trying to relaunch it next year. I would be amazed if that works. I hope it does, for the sake of the devs and stuff, of the people who work there, because otherwise the studio is probably going to shut down. It just seems like this was kind of a cell phone that was completely unnecessary, but here we are. Mass Effect, we have found out that the Mass Effect TV show on Amazon will share the same production team as the Fallout show. If you've seen the Fallout show, you like Fallout, you will see this and recognize this as a very, very, very good thing. The look of Fallout is insanely good, very true to the game, brought to life in a way that really looks great, in my opinion. They did such a good job with it. One of my biggest fears with the Mass Effect show being a live action is that trying to represent these aliens and these environments and stuff is just going to be so hard to make it not look silly for a live action game. That's just me. Maybe they'll kill it. Maybe they'll do a great job. I have no idea. I'm going to hope for the best. There's, various levels of excitement and fear about the people who are connected to this project. There's definitely some people who seem really into the series and into the franchise who I may be interviewing here at some point sooner and later. And then there's some people connected to it who haven't made the best things in the world in the past. So we're going to have to kind of hope that this plays out to this day. And I will keep preaching about it. I would just prefer to see a Mass Effect animated series, so that the actual voice actors can, do it, especially if it's going to be retelling or expanding on the original trilogy. There's lots of takes about that, whether it should be a prequel or take place after the trilogy or around Andromeda or during the trilogy, but a completely separate story with different characters that explores something else that was happening during that time. I'm kind of indifferent. I don't really care what they do. I just want it to be good. So, and them being connected to the Fallout production folks is a good sign. It's as good as one as we can hope for. And then finally, to wrap up, SkillUp has started a quote unquote non-clickbait review website and gaming news website. It is called This Week in Video Games. This harkens from his weekly gaming news series he's been doing for quite a while at this point. There is a little bit of irony, maybe it was on purpose, that he announced this in a video that had a clickbait title. It's interesting. This goes back to my opening of the show of not trying to be a petty, bitter person. I'm curious how this plays out, because this was kind of portrayed as like, hey, here's this new take on things, when it's, at the end of the day, just another crowd-funded gaming news thing that someone's doing in the industry. That's cool. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I'm a little skeptical about this being a non-clickbait site, of it not having extreme bias. I'm not under the impression that the actual SkillUp or Ralph is going to be writing for it. I suspect it's going to be other people, so that will likely be a good thing. Ralph is insanely successful. I feel like I can have opinions on it because I was, with him there way back in the day with Division 1, making Division content. That's how he started off, and then he branched out extremely smartly. It's worked out extremely well for him, and because he's a very talented content creator. Anyways, he has some extreme biases in my opinion, and he's never really hid them, and he definitely doesn't hide them these days. From his reviews and stuff, my opinion is that he seems kind of burnt out on the whole gaming industry in general, and always seems to kind of go for the baity kind of contrarian take on almost everything, but not everything. I don't know. I'll be curious to see how this plays out in the long run. I will hope the best for it. We can use more good games media. I just don't know if it's going to come from him, but I would really like to be proven wrong and to have my own thoughts about that being not correct. So I think that's the right way to portray my feelings on that. I will say that I've already seen that some of the articles people are writing are other people, but if you look at the reviews so far, it looks like all the reviews that are up are him just posting his scripts for his reviews, his video reviews, as reviews, which is fine. I'm sure they're well written, and people who like what he makes will probably love this. So, good luck. As for content updates, nothing big. I think I said last week, and I'll say it again, we're getting into a period of time where I'm about to be really, really busy as my wife, who is a teacher, goes back to teaching. That also means that I will have a little more freedom to make content and stuff like that, late next month. But the time until then will be kind of crazy. As I say every week, I feel like I do intend on finishing my Mass Effect playthrough on Twitch. So find me over there and follow. So when I randomly jump on to play for a few hours, you can come hang out. But other than that, we'll keep doing the Baunfire every week. I don't think I really have enough stuff to do a Mass Effect hypecast right now. I suspect I will sooner than later, so be on the lookout for that. Like I said, I would like to get back to streaming a bit. Battlefield 6 will likely be a source of me streaming fairly often. That may be I stream late night just when I get to play on my own, and I just kind of hang out and play. And if people want to chat, they can, instead of doing anything really focused like I normally do. And that's kind of that. And that is where we are going to wrap this episode up. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, leave a review on Spotify or iTunes, and subscribe to the Bond Diesel YouTube channel to get all of my videos, including this podcast. Thank you to everyone who supports as YouTube members and or Twitch subscribers. If you are interested in supporting this podcast and all of my other content, please check out the links in the show description. If you have any questions or feedback, be sure to hit me up on social media at Baundiesel or at the Baunfire. Check out my Discord and the Linktree link in the description of the podcast, or leave a comment on Spotify or YouTube. That is all I have for this episode of the Baunfire Gaming Podcast. So until next time.